that's what I call gaming.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Now That's What I Call Gaming. If you're new to the channel, make sure you smash that subscribe button and ring that notification bell so that you don't miss a second of all my great content. We've taken a look at some great remakes on the show so far. Since it's October, it's the month of spookiness and Halloween, I thought it'd be a great time to take a look at one of perhaps the greatest remakes ever made. The iconic Resident Evil.
Resident Evil, or Biohazard in Japan, was released by Capcom in 1996. Originally beginning itself as a remake of the Famicom game Sweet Home, Resident Evil would actually grow to become its own unique game.
Resident Evil.
The premise is simple. A series of murders have been taking place outside of Raccoon City. Victims appear to be eaten. A special squad of the Raccoon Police Department, STARS, was sent in to investigate, beginning with the Bravo team. But when communication is lost, Alpha Team is sent in to investigate. Upon finding Bravo Team's crashed helicopter, they are attacked by a group of dogs and forced into taking refuge in a nearby mansion. It is here that the gameplay begins. You select one of two characters, Jill Valentine or Chris Redfield. Besides the obvious difference of being a guy or a girl, this is also your difficulty setting. With Jill, you get 8 item slots, but can take less damage. You'll also gain access to a powerful weapon, more on that later, to help you through the mission. Jill also gets a lockpick, so she can open many doors and drawers that Chris will need to find small keys for. Finally, Jill begins the game with a gun. Chris, on the other hand, only has 6 item slots. However, he can take more punishment than Jill, but he does not get the same powerful weapon as Jill does, and does not come equipped with a gun right away. Also, as mentioned, Chris has to collect small keys to unlock certain things, which takes up 1 space of his already limited inventory. So Jill's game would be considered easy mode, while Chris's game one could consider either normal or hard, depending on several factors. This is never explicitly stated at the selection screen, so it is a novel way of selecting your difficulty level. Now, as you go through the game, you discover the people in the mansion are all dead and have been turned into zombies, bent on devouring your flesh. You not only have to survive this, but solve the many puzzles in the mansion and find a way to escape. What makes Resident Evil so thrilling, especially for first-time players, is that it's all about managing your inventory. At the beginning of the game, you are in no way prepared to kill everything you come across. Ammo and weapons are spread out sparsely throughout the game, and you will find yourself having to sometimes forego getting ammo because your inventory fills up. Before we talk more about the game, we need to discuss one of the most hated aspects of it, the controls. This game uses what has been dubbed as tank controls. Basically, when you press up on the controller, your character moves forward regardless of the direction the camera is facing. Also, you need to hold square down to run, otherwise you walk slowly, and those are your only 2 speeds. For the time it was acceptable, but it's a mechanic that has not aged well at all. Still, if you're jumping into these original games, you will get used to it. Also, when you go to shoot at anything, you're basically locked into place. Although not as bad as in some games, you are not able to move while shooting. In the original release, you even had to manually aim your weapon, all while the enemies close in on you. This adds to the tension, but it is still something where you'll really wish you could move while shooting, or at least move while having your weapon ready. Speaking of versions of the original game, there are actually 3 of them, each with slight differences. You have the original release first. Then there's a director's cut version, which adds additional features while also rearranging the placement of some items. This was released to keep fan interest in the series before the release of the sequel. Finally, there's the director's cut DualShock version, which adds the new vibration function and updated music. This is the version you're seeing here now. There were also versions released on the Sega Saturn, Windows, and the Nintendo DS. Each came with their own unique additions. Now, let's talk about the music. It is, in a word, excellent. It creates the right amount of atmosphere without overpowering the gameplay. The sounds are also spot on. You'll tense up when you hear the moan of a zombie upon entering a room, or the click of nails on the floor. Everything about this game just works. Visually, for 1996, it's very impressive. The use of an opening cinematic in the beginning video is very well done, even if it is cheesy acting. The fact that it's in black and white also adds that classic horror movie atmosphere that the game was trying to build. In the game, the use of static camera angles also evokes images of the classic horror movies, like Night of the Living Dead or Frankenstein, just to name a couple. This also adds to the tension because while you may hear an enemy, you might not see it right away. Is it down that hallway? Or is it around the corner? Do you have any time to prepare yourself? It's just another one of the many tricks that Capcom uses to heighten the tension. As far as differences between the 2 characters, there's really not that much. The story unfolds almost exactly the same way, both characters do all the same puzzles, and neither character ever runs into or even interacts with the other, except in the very end of the game. The only major difference is Jill is helped along by Barry Burton, while Chris gets assistance from Rookie Stars member Rebecca Chambers. So beyond the difficulty changes, you won't be missing any story elements by choosing one character over another. The story is also told in a very unique way. While you get all the main points of the story fleshed out through the movie sequences, all the stuff that happened before the story that adds to the effect of it is told through files you find throughout the game. These files point to the mansion being a front for a pharmaceutical company's illegal experiments with a virus that got loose and infected the entire facility. Through the different types of files, which include diaries, faxes, documents, pictures, letters, you get to see and appreciate the depths of the narrative that Capcom was developing. You feel for the poor researcher like Martin Crackhorn, who, after explaining what happened to his wife Alma, decides to take his own life rather than walk around as a zombie. It really humanizes these enemies and shows that the zombies, while dangerous, are also victims themselves.
All in all, Capcom created an instant masterpiece. So much so that when deciding on what games to include on the PlayStation Classic, Resident Evil was one of those 20 games. Resident Evil would go on to be one of the dominant series for the PlayStation, alongside of such big hits as Crash Bandicoot, Spyro, or Final Fantasy. After the end of the PlayStation era, Capcom signed an exclusivity agreement with Nintendo to bring the Resident Evil series over to the GameCube. And while they did give the GameCube a couple of unique Resident Evil games, as well as porting over 2, 3, and Code Veronica, they decided to do something a little different with the original Resident Evil. They wanted to do something big for the first game, which, compared to all the sequels, didn't age as well. So what they decided to go ahead and do? is remake the entire game from the ground up.
And what a remake it would be. Others refer to it as Remake by the fans. This game was released in 2002 for the GameCube, and it was completely rebuilt from the ground up. For starters, the first obvious thing to jump out is the detail. Everything from the environments to the characters themselves received brand new looks and details that you just didn't see in the original. Also, the environment looks way more creepy and foreboding than in the original. Just compare the look of the main hall in the original with the main hall in the remake. The remake maintained the same fixed camera as the original, but with new angles. Seeing your character running down a hall like this, with the camera sitting in a cockeyed state, it really adds to the suspense and horror factor. The game still maintains the tank controls of the original, but again, for the time, it was something you were used to. Even now, it still doesn't take much to get used to it. However, all the same complaints about the aiming and moving controls from the original are still around in this one. The remake also changes up the puzzles, so you're not going to just breeze through it because you know what's coming. This was a smart move, as it would bring in both newcomers to the series as well as enthrall longtime fans. There are also new enemies. Zombies don't just disappear after being put down. They either have to be burned or lose their heads, otherwise they'll come back as faster and deadlier Crimson Heads. Of course, to burn them, you need both a flask filled with kerosene and a lighter. This is actually an interesting mechanic because while Jill again gets the lockpick, Chris actually begins with the lighter. This also means that to burn zombies, Jill will need to fill 2 inventory slots, whereas Chris will only need to take up 1. Another new enemy is Lisa Trevor. Initially, she comes off as just another tyrant-style enemy, but her tragic tale is fleshed out through letters written by her, her mother, and diaries left behind by her father. It just adds another layer to the tapestry of the story that is Resident Evil.
Where's Barry?
Beyond the visuals, puzzles, and enemies, all of the dialogue has been redone, sounding much more natural than the B-movie dialogue from the original game that makes you laugh more than be scary.
All right.
Just take a listen to some of the differences.
I'm going with you. Chris is our old partner, you know.
I'm going with her. Chris and I go back a long way.
Stop it! Don't open that door!
Jill, no. You don't want to go back out there.
That was too close. You were almost a Jill sandwich.
That was a close one. A second late, you would have fit nicely into a sandwich.
But something's wrong with this house.
Whoa! This hall is dangerous.
Other than I'm still alive in this madhouse? No.
Can't say it's much safer here either.
The remake was an incredible thing that still holds up even to this day. Most often when people talk about playing the first Resident Evil game in the series, this is the one they are referring to.
So I think it goes without saying that I'm going to recommend you play the remake of the game. It has a much richer story, way better graphics, and offers a more all-around experience, especially when you put it up against the later games of the series.
Since there's so many different versions of the game, rather than going over the cost of every different version there is, let's just look at a few of the options. For the original version of the game, you'll very likely want to go with the director's cut. A disc-only copy of that game will run you at least $20. You could also get the original experience on the Nintendo DS with Deadly Silence, but that will cost you about $50 for the cartridge. As I've mentioned before, it is included on the PlayStation Classic, which will cost you at least $36 to get loose. And on the PS Classic, it is the European version of the game, which, as you saw in my Mega Man reviews, means it will run slightly slower than the North American version. But you can easily modify the system to put the North American version on if that becomes a problem. Also, that version is not the DualShock version, as the PS Classic does not do vibration. If you have a PS3, Vita, or PSP, then at the time of this video, you can get this game as one of their PS Classics on those consoles for $10. But there's no guarantee that'll be the case forever. So, for playing the original version of this iconic game, I'd say your best bet is to get the PlayStation Classic. For the remake, things are a lot easier. The original GameCube version will only cost you slightly more than $15 for a loose copy. But even if you don't have a GameCube, this game was ported over to just about every console out there. On the Wii, a copy known as Resident Evil Archives will cost you around $9 for a disc-only copy. It was also remastered and re-released on current generation consoles, which is what I played on to get all the footage you're seeing here. A physical copy of this game, which also includes Resident Evil 0, will run you around $15 for either the PS4 or Xbox One. Or if you want to get it digitally, or if you have a digital-only console, it'll cost you around $20 for this game. It's also available through Steam on the PC, but it's also the same price there, $20.
So naturally, if you're going to be getting the remake, you definitely want to try to get your hands on the physical edition. Unless you happen to get lucky and catch it on sale, which does happen every once in a while, this is how you're going to get the most bang for your buck. But ultimately, whatever way you choose to play this game, you're going to be in for a hell of a good time. It's the perfect game to play with the lights turned down, the fog rolling in, the crickets chirping in the background, and the slow, creepy sound of something coming up behind you. Happy Halloween to you all, and thank you so much for watching another episode of Now That's What I Call Gaming. Got him, Itchy.